Today, I want to talk about why I believe data has a lot to do with life, especially here on this planet, and has to do with humanity's ability to thrive, hopefully not just here on Earth, but potentially Moon, potentially Mars. There are three things I kind of want to get across today on some concepts. One, we're at a precipice of our ability to use data. It's very exciting. We have to be careful about data and what data can actually do for us, especially in the construction industry, and both from a macro and a micro perspective. I'm new here. I'm new to this industry, so I want to just give a brief overview of my background so that you can have some understanding where I'm coming from on approaching this particular problem. I grew up around two scientists. My mom and my dad met at a marine biology research institute, and my father went on to work at the Department of Energy. And I've been around energy, science, and things like global warming since I was a child. And so it was dinner table conversation all the time. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a passion for trying to solve hard problems, and I've been working in the data security industry for a long time, helping organizations like General Electric and others build massive abilities to be able to consume lots of data. And I'm moving on to a new role right now, but that role is still trying to figure out how we can have more enterprises be able to give that power of data down to the citizens developer. Lastly, another role that I have is in standards. And when we look at data, making sure that governments and companies and nonprofit organizations can share that data and normalize that data is foundational to the speed at which we're able to actually consume, and be able to grow with that data. And in the construction industry, I cannot imagine how you build a building without standards, right? Everything from literally the size of all the materials that you use. All of that has to do with standards, and data is no different. Data needs standards to be able to pass from one organization to another. I think we're at a precipice. It's actually a really exciting time. I'm seeing a lot of different industries be able to change the way that they're looking at problems, and we're also at a precipice in humanity as we start to see the world warm more rapidly. And we all, I think, are looking to each other to figure out how can we get involved and build a better future for humanity and for our children and for all the people who are around us. And so that's really, how does your ecosystem take advantage of this data that we see out in the world? And so, and that's the key thing, 3 points that I want to talk about today, which is one, what has happened over the last couple hundred years to make it so that we have this ability? Two, what are some things that we need to watch out for? Because not everyone comes from just an altruistic perspective. And then what are the things that are capable that we're going to be able to use this data as we move forward in society? So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was at a friend of mine's house. And he had this beautiful framed picture on the wall, the one that you're seeing right now in front of you. And I sat there with a glass of wine and I stared at that picture for a long time. And I started consuming and understanding what it took to build a map in 1857. This was not a simple process. Someone actually dedicated their life to go around and measure every single point in an area to actually build the cartography that created what we see today. And these maps had amazing detail, but they were not necessarily accessible to anyone. Oftentimes, only the wealthy had maps, and it was not what we see today. Today, everyone on this device has a real-time map of the world, anywhere in the world. You can zoom in and zoom out on it with your fingertips. We have drones, and I'm assuming, as I get into the construction industry, I've got to imagine you're using drones and other technologies and satellite maps to be able to get more precise information. The amount of data that is being ingested today is unlike we've ever seen before. Artificial intelligence, all these tools that we see out there, they're fundamentally shifting our ability. What we could do 5 years ago to what we could do today is drastically different. And so think about what we're going to be able to do 5 years from now. We're really going to be able to start mapping things out. Heat islands, these are a big problem in large cities. This industry here has the ability to fundamentally shift that. It has the ability to be able to look at all these metrics and be able to see what happens before you build something, after you're building something, and where does that go in the future, and then take that knowledge and do it even better in the next city. I briefly was watching the presentation before and seeing these geoscapes, these massive buildings built in the ocean. That's not going to happen without the ability to really be able to understand everything from a physics perspective, from a satellite perspective, to a LiDAR perspective. Today, you can launch a satellite for 60,000 euros. Now, I don't necessarily have 60,000 euros lying around, but just the concept that if I wanted to, I could launch a satellite, a human can launch a satellite, we're in a completely different world. We're also in a world that's warming. The other thing that's happened in the last 165 years, and I'm sure this has been a topic of the conference today, is that we've had a 1.1 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. And we're looking, if we're lucky, we're looking at a 3 to 5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature in the next 100 years. And what has happened just within the last 4 years, is we finally have been able to get enough satellite data, enough ground data, enough scientific data into some very large machines to be able to give us the ability to have a better idea of the future, better than we ever had before. And that's going to increase. That ability is going to be increasing. And we're going to need to use that so that we can actually see if what we are doing is making a difference. One note that I didn't mention before is I believe in terraforming. And it's a slightly different concept when it comes to looking at how you approach environmental challenges. But I believe that if we don't use the data that's around us to make material changes to our own environments, and this industry probably has one of the best abilities to do that through construction, you can materially change both the microclimate and the macroclimate if we continue to move down this road. So now that we have all this data coming in, the complexity is mind-boggling. But we have AI now. AI is advanced to a certain stage that we're able to use it to be able to summarize information and get answers with terabytes of information. We also have to make sure that we open our data. The more that governments and nonprofits and other organizations, such as the World Bank and others, give us this data, we can then consume it, understand it, and make choices around it. We also need to take this data and make sure we build financially stable environments. What do I mean by that? If you build a house that is so expensive, no one can buy it, it may be the greenest house on the planet, but it doesn't do anyone any good. So how do we take this knowledge from the information that we have to make sure that not only do we build a sustainable building, but we build a building that is economically sustainable as well? Governments and nonprofits are not going to be the solution to this problem, but they are our advocates and they can help us get at that data. So again, I mentioned in the beginning, I do believe that geospatial data gives us the ability to thrive on this planet, unlike we've been able to do in the past. Now, danger there be dragons. Sorry, I'm a nerd at heart, can't help myself. But danger there be dragons. People are also going to use this data against us. So we've already heard about misinformation, and we're looking at potentially fake data, um, but there's trillions, and I'm not jesting. There is trillions of euros on the line when we look at the global impact of both carbon credits, supply chain and manufacturing. Just think about just the entire supply chain of the whole manufacturing system. People are going to take this data and they're going to use it for fraud. They're going to use it for theft. And they're going to use it, they're basically going to be using it for financial gain. And so we have to be aware of that when we build these systems. We know that because that's the world we live in today. But when we consume all this information, we're going to make trusted decisions on that information. And if we can't trust that data, we'll be making the wrong decisions. And that may be exactly what somebody wants us to do. And so we always have to be aware that in this world where we're going out there making humanity thrive, we're going to have to make sure that we always look for words like immutable, auditable, trusted. These things, these words are very important, and we have technologies today to help that move forward. The other thing that we have to watch out for is the lack of standards. As I said, I'm a board member of Oasis. It's a very large standard organization. And the more we're able to standardize in the industry, the more we're able to share information in a normalized format, the faster we'll be able to consume that information. And then finally, I mentioned artificial intelligence earlier. Artificial intelligence is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's also a tool that can be misunderstood. So there's something called non-deterministic AI versus deterministic AI. And there are two basic thought points about how you approach artificial intelligence. One is where you sort of randomly throw data out there and you get an answer, which is possibly 99.8% right. But that also means 0.2% wrong. So you have to understand, why did the machine make this decision? It's called deterministic AI or explainable AI. That's another thing that we're going to have to look at when you start getting more involved in data, which we all will, and our children will. We need to teach them that these are things that we need to watch out for, and just say, how did you come to this answer? This answer is great, but how did that happen? Interpol's watching this from the crime side. These are things that people are relatively well aware of, but it's something I want to get out there. So to sort of my final point, as I said, the three key points I want to talk about is the change at the pace of technology to allow us to be where we are today, understanding that there are some dragons that we have to watch out for, and then the world that we get to play in. And that world is, very exciting. And it allows us to predict the future in a way that we haven't been able to before. It allows us to research all the things that we can do. There's a concept called the digital twin, and a lot of different organizations are using it. I first remember General Electric using it about 10 years ago. And that is the ability to take, say, a building that you're building, but build it first in a computer system and then see how it affects the environment. We can do that fairly accurately today, and even model the supply chain elements of it. And this conference, I'm assuming this has been discussed before, but this is a fascinating ability that we're able to do in this new world that we have with all the access to the data around us. So that simulation, being able to see what can happen, how can we start altering, how can we start terraforming the planet so that we're able to control our environment, so that we can have an environment where our children and our children's children can thrive. Automation and resilience are also two key things that are all going to come out of this as well. And that automation is all the way from 3D printing to the technology systems that we use to continue to monitor the heat system, the HVAC systems within the building. I work with a company called SoftBank Robotics. They're doing some very interesting things with robots, everything from cleaning robots to, we're going to start seeing this new capabilities, move forward, and it's going to fundamentally shift. COVID fundamentally shift our way of approaching, a new world, and we're looking at office space in downtowns, or in cities all around us, and we're trying to see how do we reutilize this, how do we revitalize this. We went from having a surplus of workers to not enough workers to get jobs done. Robots are going to be able to be a big piece of this, and also be a big piece of this within the construction industry, moving materials around on job sites. This is, again, something that I'm sure everyone here is very aware of, but it's fascinating, and it's all connected. All of this is connected. And so that's the other thing that we need to fundamentally take away from this, is that as we ingest all this information, all the information is connected. And so that's why we have to be very careful with that information, because somebody's going to come in and possibly flummox it. Again, I'm a cybersecurity nerd, and these are things that I always think about. And I think, the OODA loop here is something that, is a concept that actually came from the U.S. Air Force, decades ago. But it's a concept of observe, orient, decide, and act. And no matter where you are, whether it's you're looking at post build, looking at heat islands within a city and seeing if you've made a change there, to the actual building itself, that OODA loop of data is what's going to help us be able to have an approach where we're constantly learning, constantly adjusting in a way that we simply haven't happened before. Again, it was an honor to speak here today. I really appreciate the ability. And again, the 3 key points I just kind of want to reinforce are: we have access to information unlike we ever had before. We have access to tools such as AI. We have to be very wary that people may utilize this information. And then we look at the ability to simulate and be able to have items like digital twins so that we can fundamentally move forward. But this is why I actually think that data is what's going to help humanity thrive in the decades and centuries to come. Thank you very much.
Think big.